Let's begin.
Wait. What?
Think about the last time you tried to learn something new. Maybe it was a language, an instrument, a new skill at work. Remember that feeling when it just wouldn't click? When you watched someone younger pick it up in half the time? I used to think that was just how brains worked. Some people are naturally good at things, and the rest of us have to accept our limitations. Turns out, I was completely wrong, and the science that proves it might be the most important thing you learn this year. I'm talking about neuroplasticity, and before you click away thinking this is going to be some dense neuroscience lecture, stay with me, because what we've discovered about how your brain actually changes is going to flip everything you thought you knew about learning, skill development, and your own potential.
There is now a level 0.
So here's the thing that blew my mind when I first learned about it. Your brain, right now, as you're watching this video, is physically different than it was when you woke up this morning. Not metaphorically different, actually structurally different. Dr. Lara Boyd, a brain researcher at the University of British Columbia, puts it simply: every time you learn a new fact or skill, you change your brain. Not just your knowledge, your actual brain. For decades, scientists believed the opposite. The old thinking went like this: your brain develops during childhood, solidifies around puberty, and then basically that's it. You're stuck with what you've got. Sure, you can learn new information, but the brain itself? Flat, locked in place. Any changes after that were assumed to be negative, brain cells dying with age, damage from injury or disease.
But in the last 25 years, that entire framework has been shattered. We now know that your brain is constantly reorganizing itself, forming new connections, even growing new neurons in certain areas. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it's happening in your brain right now, this very second.
When you concentrate, you stink. But perhaps that is my fault. I cannot train you the way I have trained the 5.
Let me explain how this actually works, because understanding the mechanism makes all the difference in how you can use it. Your brain changes in 3 basic ways. The first is chemical. Your brain cells, called neurons, communicate by sending chemical signals back and forth. Think of it like a conversation between neighbors shouting across their yards. To support learning, your brain can increase the volume of those signals or make them more concentrated. This happens fast, which is why you can sometimes improve at a skill even within a single practice session. You've experienced this. Maybe you're learning a song on guitar, and by the end of an hour, you can play a riff you couldn't touch at the beginning. That's chemical plasticity. But here's the catch. This kind of change supports short-term memory and short-term skill improvement. It's not permanent. We've all had the experience of practicing something, getting better at it, feeling like we've nailed it, and then coming back the next day and it's like we forgot everything. That's because the chemical changes didn't trigger the second type of plasticity yet. The second way your brain changes is structural. During learning, your brain actually alters the physical connections between neurons. The structure of your brain is changing. This takes more time than chemical changes, but it's what creates long-term memory and long-term skill improvement. When you practice something repeatedly over days and weeks, you're not just changing the signal strength between neurons, you're changing the wiring diagram itself. This is why consistency beats intensity when you're learning something new. Example, 1 hour of practice every day for a week will rewire your brain more effectively than 7 hours crammed into one day. The structural changes need time to solidify. The third type of change is functional. As you use a specific brain region more and more, it becomes easier to activate. It's like a path through the woods. The more people walk it, the clearer it becomes. And here's what's wild. Your brain starts to shift when and how different regions activate based on what you're learning. Entire networks of brain activity reorganize themselves. So, these 3 types of plasticity, chemical, structural, and functional, are all working together whenever you're learning something, and they're not limited by age. A 60-year-old's brain is just as plastic as a 20-year-old's. The mechanisms are the same. So if that's true, why does it seem like kids learn faster than adults?
Now listen closely.
Dr. Kelly Lambert, a neuroscientist who studies the relationship between behavior and brain chemistry, ran a fascinating experiment with rats. She divided them into two groups. The first group had to dig through bedding to find Fruit Loops. They had to work for their reward. The second group got the same Fruit Loops, same arena, but they didn't have to do anything. They just got the reward regardless of their behavior. She called the first group the worker rats and the second group the trust fund rats. And yes, that's the actual terminology used in the lab. After 6 weeks of this training, Lambert tested both groups on new challenges they'd never encountered before. The worker rats, the ones who had to put in effort for their rewards, dove right in. They explored more, they showed better problem solving, they demonstrated what scientists call effective coping strategies. When the researchers examined their brains afterward, the worker rats showed significantly more neuroplasticity, more complex neural connections, higher levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically fertilizer for your brain. The trust fund rats? They barely engaged. Their brains showed minimal change. Here's what that means for you. Your brain doesn't just change from passive exposure to information. It changes most dramatically when you actively engage, when there's effort involved, when you're reaching slightly beyond your current capability. The struggle isn't a sign that you're bad at something. The struggle is the mechanism that drives neuroplastic change. This is actually one of the most important findings in the research. Dr. Boyd's team discovered that increased difficulty during practice, increased struggle, leads to both more learning and greater structural change in the brain. You're not supposed to find it easy. The difficulty is doing the work. Now, let's talk about why kids seem to have an advantage, because understanding this will change how you approach learning as an adult. There's this concept in neuroscience called critical periods. These are windows of time when the brain is especially plastic for specific types of learning. For example, there's a critical period for language acquisition, roughly from birth to age 7. During that window, a child's brain is primed to absorb language patterns with very little effort. They're not trying to memorize grammar rules or vocabulary lists. They're just soaking it up. Dr. Takao Hensch, a professor at Harvard, has done extensive research on what determines these critical periods. It turns out they're not magic windows that randomly open and close. There are specific molecular mechanisms, actual physical breaks in the brain that close critical periods as you age. And here's the exciting part. We're learning how to release those breaks. In one study, Hensch's team gave adult participants a drug called valproic acid for just 2 weeks. This drug is an HDAC inhibitor. It affects how genes are expressed in the brain. During those 2 weeks, the participants practiced various skills that are normally only acquired during critical periods, distinguishing subtle speech sounds in foreign languages, identifying individual monkey faces, and absolute pitch, the ability to identify a musical note without a reference tone. For most of the tasks, 2 weeks wasn't enough to show dramatic results, but absolute pitch? The adults improved significantly. These were people with no musical training who had never developed this skill during their critical period as children, and with the right combination of neurochemical enhancement and focused practice, they started to develop it as adults. Now, before you go looking for ways to get valproic acid, understand what this research is actually telling us. It's not saying take a pill and suddenly you can learn like a child. The drug didn't make them learn. It opened a window of enhanced plasticity, but the participants still had to put in intensive, focused practice to see results. The pill created an opportunity. The practice created the change. This is a theme that runs through all the research on neuroplasticity. There is no shortcut that replaces doing the work, but there are ways to make your work more effective. Let's talk about some of those ways. First, immersion and attention are crucial. Remember that study Dr. Hensch mentioned, where American infants were exposed to native Chinese speakers? The babies who interacted with a live person learned to distinguish Chinese speech sounds. The babies who watched the exact same sessions on video or heard them on audio, they learned nothing.
Same information, same duration, but no learning without the live interaction. There's something about active engagement, about social connection, about the full sensory experience that supercharges neuroplasticity. This has huge implications for how you structure your learning. Watching YouTube tutorials is better than nothing, but it's not as effective as actually doing the thing, ideally with real-time feedback from someone else. Second, the type of practice matters more than the amount of practice. You've probably heard the 10,000 hours to mastery idea that got popular a few years ago. It's not wrong exactly, but it's incomplete. Dr. Boyd's research shows that the amount of practice you need to master a skill varies wildly from person to person. For some people, it might take 10,000 hours. For others, it might take 5,000. For others, it might take 20,000. Why? Because neuroplasticity doesn't follow a one-size-fits-all pattern. Your brain's structure and chemistry are unique. The way your brain responds to practice is unique. This means that comparing your progress to someone else's is not just demotivating, it's scientifically meaningless. Your brain is running its own optimization program. What you can control is the quality of your practice. Deliberate practice, where you're working right at the edge of your ability, getting immediate feedback, and consciously working on specific weaknesses, drives more neuroplastic change per hour than mindless repetition. 1 hour of truly focused, difficult practice beats 5 hours of going through the motions. Third, your lifestyle behaviors are constantly shaping your brain, for better or worse. Dr. Lambert's research on Behaviorceuticals, I love that term, shows that repetitive behaviors change your neurochemistry in measurable ways. Knitting, for example, increases serotonin through repetitive motion. Gardening, woodworking, cooking, activities where you can see the direct result of your physical effort, these increase dopamine and reduce cortisol. This isn't just feel-good speculation. An impressive study in Denmark followed nearly 1 million people and found that those who grew up with more green space around their homes, more trees, more shrubs, were up to 55% less likely to experience depression in their lives. The researchers couldn't bottle it, but the effect size was huge. Your brain evolved to move, to build things, to interact with the physical world. When you spend all day sitting, staring at screens, using your brain but not your body, you're not giving your brain the full range of inputs it's designed to process, and that matters for neuroplasticity. Here's something that might surprise you. The rats in Lambert studies that lived in enriched environments, basically a Disneyland for rats with lots of things to climb, explore, and manipulate, showed more neuroplasticity than rats in standard cages. But when they tested rats in natural outdoor environments versus artificial enriched environments, the rats in nature showed an edge in emotional resilience. We are not rats, obviously, but the principle holds. Your environment is shaping your brain constantly. A sterile, unchanging environment provides fewer opportunities for neuroplastic change than a rich, varied, challenging environment. Fourth, and this is crucial, neuroplasticity works in both directions. You learn something new, you refine a skill, you develop resilience, but it can also be negative. You can forget skills you once had. You can develop chronic pain patterns that are maintained by neuroplastic changes. You can become addicted to substances or behaviors because your brain has rewired itself around those patterns. Dr. Boyd says it clearly, your brain has been shaped by everything you do, but also by everything you don't do. If you stop using a skill, the neural networks supporting it will weaken. If you repeatedly engage in a harmful behavior, those networks will strengthen. Your brain doesn't judge whether a change is good or bad, it just responds to what you do consistently. This is both empowering and sobering. It empowers you because it means you have more control over your brain than you might have thought, but it also means you're responsible for that control. Your habits, your daily behaviors, your consistent patterns, they're literally building your brain. Now, let's talk about what happens when the brain is damaged, because this is where some of the most exciting neuroplasticity research is happening.
Dr. John Krakauer at Johns Hopkins studies recovery from stroke. Stroke is the leading cause of long-term disability in adults worldwide, and for a long time, we weren't very good at helping people recover. The standard approach was to wait until the patient was stable, then start gentle rehabilitation weeks after the stroke occurred. But research in animal models showed something different. If you give a mouse a stroke and immediately start intensive training, not waiting a week, starting the next day, the mouse recovers almost completely. The brain injury itself opens a critical period of heightened plasticity, but if you wait too long to take advantage of that window, it closes. Krakauer ran a study with stroke patients using an immersive video game where they controlled a dolphin using their affected arm. The game was designed to require high cognitive engagement, cardiovascular challenge, and skill learning all at once. Patients played for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon, 5 days a week, for 3 weeks. The results? Impressive. Patients who used the dolphin game showed twice the improvement of patients who received standard rehabilitation, and this was starting 3 weeks post-stroke, which is already late according to the animal research. Better, when they redesigned the study to enroll patients within a week of their stroke, the results got even better. This tells us something fundamental about neuroplasticity. Timing matters, intensity matters, and the type of engagement matters. The brain doesn't respond equally to all interventions. There's also work being done on using brain stimulation to enhance plasticity. Brett Wingeyer developed a device that uses transcranial direct current stimulation, basically a small electrical current applied to the scalp to modulate neural activity during training. Athletes using the device while practicing specific movements showed improvements in what's called motor synergy, the ability to fire the right muscles at the right time in the right sequence. The mechanism isn't fully understood yet, but the idea is that neurons that fire together wire together. By subtly changing the electrical environment around neurons during practice, you can potentially strengthen the connections that are forming. But, and this is important, the effect only works when paired with focused practice. The stimulation doesn't teach you anything, it just creates conditions where your practice might be slightly more effective. Some professional athletes have used these devices to improve vertical leap, reaction time, and movement coordination. TJ Carey, a player for the Oakland Raiders, combined the brain stimulation with very thoughtful, measured training and saw dramatic improvements in his vertical jump. But the key word there is combined. The technology was paired with excellent training methodology. This brings up an important question. Should we be using these technologies to enhance healthy brains, or should we reserve them for medical applications? Dr. Krakauer is skeptical of the consumer enhancement market. He points out that we don't fully understand the long-term effects of repeatedly opening critical periods or artificially enhancing plasticity in healthy brains. When you're treating a serious condition like depression or helping someone recover from a stroke, the risk-benefit calculation is clear. But for a healthy athlete trying to jump an inch higher, Dr. Hensch shares that concern. The molecular breaks that close critical periods aren't just there to be annoying. They also protect neurons from damage. In Alzheimer's disease, the brain regions that are most plastic throughout life, the ones that allow for complex learning and adaptation, are the first to degenerate. It's possible that extended plasticity comes with increased vulnerability. His research on mice that were genetically modified to have more plasticity throughout life showed that yes, they were better learners, but they also developed neurodegenerative symptoms earlier than normal mice. The critical period breaks might be frustrating when you're trying to learn something, but they might also be protecting your brain from long-term damage. This doesn't mean we should avoid challenging our brains or trying to learn new things. It means we should be thoughtful about interventions that artificially manipulate neuroplasticity without fully understanding the consequences. The good news is that natural neuroplasticity, the kind you get from consistent practice, immersive experiences, physical activity, and environmental enrichment, doesn't seem to carry those risks. Your brain has evolved to handle that kind of change. It's when we start adding powerful drugs or aggressive brain stimulation that we're in uncharted territory. So where does this leave you, practically speaking?
First, understand that your capacity to learn and change is far greater than you probably think. There is no age cutoff where your brain stops being plastic. A 60-year-old can learn a new language. A 70-year-old can develop new motor skills. It will probably take more conscious effort than it would have at age 7, but the mechanism works. Second, the struggle is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're doing it right. If learning feels easy, you're probably not at the edge of your ability. You're not creating the conditions for maximal neuroplastic change. Embrace the difficulty. That's your brain doing the work of rewiring itself. Third, consistency beats intensity. Your brain needs repeated exposure over time to create structural changes. You can't cram neuroplasticity the way you might cram for an exam. An hour a day, every day, will reshape your brain more effectively than 7 hours once a week. Fourth, pay attention to how you learn best. There's real variability in how individual brains respond to different learning strategies. Some people might benefit from high-intensity immersion. Others might need more gradual, spaced-out practice. Some people learn better in social settings. Others need solitude to focus. Experiment and notice what actually produces results for you, not what works for someone else. Fifth, take care of the fundamentals. Sleep, physical activity, social connection, time in nature, these aren't optional nice-to-haves. They're part of the infrastructure that supports neuroplasticity. Dr. Lambert's rats in enriched environments showed more plastic brains, but rats in natural environments showed better emotional resilience. We probably need both, challenging mental work and restorative natural experiences. Sixth, be intentional about what you're practicing. Remember, neuroplasticity works in both directions. Every time you mindlessly scroll social media, you're training your brain to crave that pattern. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, you're strengthening avoidance circuits. Every time you ruminate on anxious thoughts, you're deepening those neural pathways. Your brain is always learning. Make sure it's learning what you actually want it to learn. And finally, be patient with yourself. Neuroplastic change takes time. The chemical changes that support short-term improvement can happen quickly, but the structural changes that create lasting ability need weeks and months to consolidate. You're not going to master something in a weekend. You're rewiring your brain, and that's a process that unfolds on the scale of months and years, not hours and days. There's something deeply hopeful in this research. It means you're not stuck with the brain you have. You're not limited by some fixed potential that was determined in childhood. Your brain is a dynamic, responsive system that's constantly adapting to what you do with it. But it also means you're responsible. You can't blame your brain for your limitations. The tools are there. The mechanisms work. Whether you use them or not is up to you. So here's my question for you. What do you want your brain to be able to do that it can't do right now? What skill, what capability, what pattern of thinking would change your life if you developed it? Because the research is clear, you can develop it. Not easily, not quickly, but genuinely. Your brain is waiting to be shaped. What are you going to build? If you found this useful, subscribe for more videos on the science of learning and performance, and drop a comment telling me what you're working on learning right now. I'm genuinely curious what skills people are developing. Your brain is changing right now as you finish this video. Make sure it's changing in the direction you want.